Vanderjam.
It's true what they say. Go Christmas shopping, get panties dropping. Good morning. It's the Vander Jam. As always, it's me, Mayor Howard Vander, and as always, you can find me living over on Twitter at Vander_I am. I am the voodoo shaman of Vander Jamin, and we are back. Funny enough, I was feeling sad, and not just sad, but angry and self-harmful through the day. And the moment that I start talking out loud in a room I'm the only person in, I suddenly start feeling better. It puts a pin in the bubble, as it were. And that's why I fully endorse everybody. You, yes, you, specifically you listening to this, you should start a podcast, Do what I do. Feeling weird? Pod it out. Dealing with the holiday? Pod it out. Getting used to separation? Pod it out. Vaping. That's not really something to pod out. Makes me look cool, chucking mad clouds. That's a good thing in my life. I have gotten on top of Christmas shopping. I don't really know what I want to talk about. That's never stopped me before. I asked some people, and no one really responded. In fairness, I took a long time, not really doing anything on Twitter, and not really doing anything at all. So with Vanderjam Gaiden, a side story to the main Vanderjam canon, in this one, yes, I am separated and 37 years old. That's true in all canons, because it's true in real life. The most important canon of all. Anywho, sitting down, there was one thing I wanted to do, and that was open with a joke about Joan Didion. I realized that to tell it, there's no way, it's not snappy enough to work as the opener, like the pre-good morning. I like to have something, usually a rhyming couplet, of sorts, something like, bam, coming at you, with something unique every time. So even if people are like, oh, it's that Howard dipshit, there's at least something new and organic and vibrant within each and every episode. Same reason why I don't like reusing songs that I have written and recorded in various episodes. I probably should. I'll freely admit I have written a lot of very bad songs, and more importantly, I have written a number of songs that are just unpleasant to listen to. I don't want to subject you to that, and I don't want to subject myself to that. I don't even listen to these anymore, and looking at the numbers, neither do you. Just kidding, actually. My show remains inexplicably popular after all these years, relative to everybody else on Podomatic's performing arts chart. But what is podcasting other than a performance that you're not sure of the contours of? No, you're totally sure of the contents of, because an episode is a finite length. So, at the very least, you have a hard exit. Joan Didion, that's what I sat down to write a joke about. I know that there are many people who are big fans of Joan Didion, and, okay. I think within fandom, certainly in the present and certainly in online spaces, there's no such thing as being a fan or an appreciator. By liking a work, you must love the person, and by liking a work, you must endorse everything they do. The same reason why every so often we get back into discourse surrounding, what's your favorite movie directed by a problematic person? And it's like, okay, but is it like Michael Curtiz problematic, where production cuts are John Landis, where it led to people dying? Or is it like Roman Polanski, where it's charges that's led to international fugitive living? Which is a bizarre thing to happen for a director who's theatrically released. Remember, who was it? Victor Silva? The guy who did Powder and Jeepers Creepers. Apparently he's a registered sex offender, which makes Powder and Jeepers Creepers creepy to look at. I think because you're more inclined to see standard film vocabulary in certain paratextual terms. I am sounding like a total dork right now. Bottom line is, that movie was made by a sex offender, and every Polanski film is made by a sex offender too. And it's just like, well, I guess you can argue semantics, where it's like, well, some of his films he directed before he was a sex offender, and it's not libelous to say that he is a sex offender. It's so weird when fellow artists like Jodie Foster and people like show up and they're like, I think we should forgive Roman Polanski for his crimes. He directed The Pianist. And I'm like, that's such a weird thing. But people do it all the time. Weirdly enough, I don't think it does really happen in academia. I think there's more the acknowledgement that, yeah, you got to separate these things, that a lot of people aren't good people. Louis Althusser, brilliant, brilliant Marxist theorist. He had the, what was it, self-recognition, the idea that the arm of the state apparatus in the form of policing, he calls out, hey you, we voluntarily say, who, me? Purposely identifying ourselves as a subject and literally subject to that state power, or things to the effect of that. Bottom line is, I bring him up because he ended up like dying in an asylum. He strangled his wife, and I believe he claimed he was giving her a neck rub, and then he just blacked out, and next thing he knew, his wife was dead because he strangled her to death. Academia does weird things to people's brains. It is no surprise to learn that, yes, I do have a couple degrees. And before that sounds impressive, remember that I spent most of my life working as a line cook and also a tire salesman, and most recently, one of the cashiers at a pool and supply store. Winter is the lean season, the cruelest month, some say. Not me, though. Winter does have some highlights. I remember I brought up Roman Polanski for some reason. I'm trying to think. I do like the movie The Tenant. It's weird. I see why everyone hates it, and I kind of hate it. But I think there's a certain pleasure in watching films like that, as sort of counterintuitive as that sounds, because recently I saw the film The Final Program. It's this weird British movie directed by someone I had never heard of, starring a lot of people I had never heard of, but it's based on a book series I had never heard of by a guy named Michael Moorcock, who I guess writes like a narco-Brit mod sci-fi. Basically like punk rock Doctor Who is my impression of it. Anywho, watching this movie, I'm just sitting through it, and I'm constantly stunned by what I'm seeing, to the point where I'm like, I don't really have an opinion of it. But I've been thinking about it ever since, namely because I can't fully determine whether I absolutely hate that movie or if it's my new favorite movie. I think there is something important about polarizing works like that. Not political and outright political content is different. We'll get into that later. The whole point is that when there is such a glut of content to be had, and content being manufactured more on the industrial side of what was it, Bazin or Truffaut, who described Hollywood filmmaking as an industrial art. And I mean, it is a business. Movies are the product. And that's why in the present you see things like, apparently, the WWE has a TV deal where, regardless of ratings, they get paid a flat amount, so it almost doesn't matter if people watch the product, they just need to make it. And people have lobbied that argument, certainly, against Marvel or any other kind of long-run franchise. I saw the Marvels. It wasn't great, but I liked it. It was fun. Kamala Khan rocks, all right? And it's a film that also doesn't obnoxiously do the, look, guys, Marvel believes in girl power. Let's have some scenes of them telling off men who are being problematic. That's where we got in on this. The whole point is, problematic is, as a word, it indicates that there's a problem. And the problem with problematic is that there's a whole lot of content covered. And bad behavior is bad behavior, but I think there's also degrees to this, right? The same way that I don't think if I knew somebody on Twitter that had said something rude in a reply, okay, well, depending on the context, maybe they're a jerk, maybe they are problematic, conflict seeking. But like if they drove to my house and punched me out or like mailed me a dead bird in a mailbox and like, well, no, that's a you. I think that's a bit different, you know. And if I got this shoebox with a dead bird and a note that said "you" inside it, I don't think someone being like, "Man, people said hurtful things about me in the replies. I know where you're coming from." It's not that you're wrong. We are both experiencing suffering, but there are levels to this. You know, you wouldn't say that starting Super Mario 64, and then being on the precipice of entering Bowser's Castle for the final confrontation, the true so long gay Bowser, um, would be swinging him by the tail into the explosive spike balls. Which it's like, why are they there? They simply are there so you have a weakness. Bowser, do you want to fail? Do you express a certain self-loathing? Do you need to be told, so long, gay Bowser? What are you really running from, King Koopa? How heavy is the head that wears the crown? He's a thick dude in all his versions, you know, and that's what makes Bowser Bowser. They wouldn't let him be in charge if he was a little guy. So long, gay Bowser, though. That always makes me think of Gay Talese. That's his name. I don't believe he's written anything adjacent to LBGT. There was some controversy about him and like a story written in the New Yorker he wrote based on some guy who was like surveilling people. I don't know, and I didn't look it up before I started talking, and I'm not going to look it up now. The point is, Gay Talese was also a writer. I haven't read any of his books, but he's part of a movement in New American Writing, which, you know, sort of seems to come out of journalism. And that is a movement that includes Tom Wolfe, who, Jesus, there was a time I thought Tom Wolfe was cool because I saw a photo of him in the white suit, and I'm like, that's a neat guy. I read A Man in Full, and oh my god, is it a strange and a pretty uniquely bad book, especially because Tom Wolfe like tries to write in dialect and of the streets and that, and it's like 800 pages and the rest is high finance, and it's this cartoon world that's supposed to be ripped from the headlines. It's like pastiche. There's an almost grotesquerie about it, and I don't think it's intended to be that. I think it's intended to be more satirical, right? Like Bonfire of the Vanities, a uh, a film directed by De Palma, I believe. That aside from like that one or two shot in the movie everybody hates, I can see that. It's a movement that also includes Hunter S. Thompson, who, if I haven't said before, I mean, going back to the artist, the nature of fandom that we started out with, I would say that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is an excellent book. I don't know if I would describe Hunter S. Thompson as an excellent writer. And I think in contemporary fandom, use that distinction or that little space where it's like, well, I'm talking about the work and my endorsement of the work or my joy in reading it or understanding it as a document with a specific literary and philosophical value. Like it's not just transgressive content for its own sake. Because if that was the case, then okay, why do we recognize like Thompson as literary and say pulp smut writers not, you know, not spelled however you'd like. That's gross, and I'm sorry. All that to say is, I think you navigate. The world goes by a lot better if you're not turning everything into an instantiation of the culture wars. The rest of the world and organized media wants to do that for you. You don't have to give in to that. You know, it's important that you embrace a freedom of thought. much like Dr. Hunter S. Thompson advocated. It's funny when people refer to him as a doctor. I believe he got like a degree in ecclesiastical studies from a mail order college. Um, but the whole point is, I think, when he does it, it's a nose to the establishment. But you get guys being like, no, he's the true visionary of our times. He did mescaline and had a typewriter. He's the Jim Morrison of lit. I don't know. That being said, I did see the film Gonzo Girl at a festival. Willem Dafoe plays a Thompson analog. He's quite good in it. It's a very good little film. I would highly recommend it should it get wide release. It's directed by one of the Arquettes, and I don't know if it's the problematic one. The one who, if I remember, was words to the effect of, look, gays, we had your back. Now it's your time to move aside and stand up for women's rights in Hollywood. And I was like, wait, what? She won for Boyhood. I did not see that movie. Linklater is another director where I'm like, I like his films, and it's not like I dislike him as a director, but I haven't seen Slacker. Dazed and Confused, like, I haven't seen in full in about 20 years. I want to say. I don't really care to. Waking Life, sure. Scanner Darkly, sure. The rest of it, it's like, dude, there's a lot of movies out there. I can't see them all. I'm not Ash Ketchum. Again, I'm 37 years old. I gotta go Christmas shopping. I gotta go to work to pay my bills. I gotta like earn enough to buy people the Christmas stuff that I want to do and other non-denominational holidays. I don't only know Catholics and I don't only know white people, I swear. I guess all that to say is Dr. Hunter S. Thompson is part of that literary movement that Gay Talese is a part of and Tom Wolfe is part of. And most importantly, Joan Didion is part of. See, it all comes full circle. I'm debating whether or not to put a song in the middle. I can't tell if I like it better, whether it's one largely unbroken monologue with only editing where it's absolutely necessary and otherwise just unspooling, versus having clear segments and clear breaks. Right now, I don't think it totally matters because I'm like 16 minutes into this thing, and I'm probably just going to keep talking and then find a song to go out on. I like finding like one of the more polished songs, but it also stands out in contrast because the rest of the show is anything but. That's kind of the point, though. And back to potting it out, you have the ability to do what I do. You can very easily just record thoughts and record words and jettison it into the internet. And sometimes people are like, hey, yo, I like what you're doing. Or, hey, you made me smile. And sometimes, hey, you seem like a good person and I support you. You know, there's a lot of gratitude in there. There's a lot of fun things that can happen if you have a podcast, and you get to ironically be a podcast guy or gal or person, however you define yourself. It's 2023. It's soon to be 2024. I was born in 1986, and I feel so old. People are like, you're not old. You got the rest of your life ahead of you. And I'm like, the rest of my life is going to be a downswing from here, and I don't want to... I don't know how I feel about getting older, and I don't know how I feel about my life being a short one. I'm just like, I want to be happy. I don't know how to. I think it requires other people, and I can't force that to happen. That's being unilateral. That's being tyrannical. Who am I? Abraham Lincoln. The War of Northern Aggression. God, the word games that people do. Going back to the Culture War, everything is a shibboleth. You know, you're no longer buying mayonnaise anymore. You're directly supporting a company that funds somebody who's running against Biden and open borders. You know, like, whatever happened. I don't want to be let people enjoy things because it's important to be purposeful about what you consume. It's also important to be somewhat self-aware about your reasons why you do things. The problem is when you swing it too far into ignorance on one side or acute purposeful awareness on the other. Sometimes, as a Canadian rock band Sloan once said, if it feels good, do it. Chief Wiggum, no, Dr. Hibbert said that on The Simpsons. No, wait. Chief Wiggum did, and then Dr. Hibbert said, okay, and snapped his undies. I can't believe I made such a rookie mistake. I wonder, no, I don't think Joan Didion was ever on The Simpsons. Stephen King was. Thomas Pynchon apparently was. Tom Clancy was. I don't think Joan Didion was. And, you know, I she has that kind of like intellectual, cool cachet that like golden era Simpsons writers would probably love to have on, and nobody else would have cared about. Joan Didion, kind of famous, I guess. I don't really know that much about her, but I do know the book, A Book of Common Prayer, and I think again that's a book that without knowing much about Didion, I do love that book, and I read it every couple of years. It's interesting. It's you don't often encounter a novel like what is. It's more or less a testimonial from a woman who is like white European that married into a Central American like monarchical military state, like the head of the Banana Republic, and just a bunch of American expats, political climate in there, CIA interference, and the role of motherhood and children, and above all, a reconciliation with one's own privilege. Um, it ends up being a very interesting book, and one that feels more modern than you would necessarily think, and a book that feels a bit more eternal than you would necessarily think. It's the difference between just being a roman clef about this is about the Rwandan War. Um, that kind of is finite in ways that meditating on a theme, such as sacrifice, such as privilege and one's own class standing and the opportunities that affords and the freedom it gives you to be, as she puts it, innocent of history, to be that kind of unthinking consumer. You see that the world still happens around you. And, sometimes your action or inaction can make a significant difference. It is not always rational or easy or universal. We don't always act in accordance with a theme because people are irrational creatures. How do you make sense of that? It's like Citizen Kane, where ultimately it's a story not about leading up to the big shocking reveal. Rosebud was the sled, that explains everything. The whole point is, like the theme of the film, is that doesn't explain everything any more than any of the individual interviews do, any more than the newsreel does, because how do you reconstruct the idea of who a person was? Because who a person was is ultimately defined by the subjective perceptions we have of them. And aesthetically, it is a film where all the different flashback sequences shoot Kane differently. When people ask why this is considered the greatest film of all time, it's more because of that, as opposed to, it's a really good film. It is a really good film. That also is a film that's a romaniclef, but it manages to stay more timeless because it's ultimately about the bigger theme. Right? And that's the trick. Filmmakers, if you want to make something that endures and has staying power, take it from me. A 37-year-old sitting in his bedroom who hasn't taken a breath in half an hour, talking into a busted-ass laptop with a USB that he took from the pool store, doing a show called a Vanderjam. Ugh. I guess all that to say is I've been influenced by Joan Didion in my life because I try to be aware of privilege. I try to be aware of, opportunities afforded because I'm a white man, and I am fortunate because I can live independently, at least for a little while. Donations are appreciated. But, I've had chances, others didn't. I have a lot to be grateful for. I had a fairly stable childhood. I got to go to post-secondary education. I have stable internet and a crummy old laptop I can make a show called The Vanderjam on. People bought merch with my face on it. I've interviewed many people who I deeply admire and respect, who I think are very interesting, and some of whom quite famous. Not to brag or nothing. And that's the whole thing. I try not to brag or nothing, because at the end of the day, I have to remember, 37 years old, sitting at a laptop, doing a show called The Vanderjam. Oh my god. And, then I get depressed about that because I'm reflecting on my own privilege, and I'm like, this is the most that I've done with it. And then I get sad for a while, and then I don't really do anything, and then I pull away from people, and I give into anger, And then I sit down and remember I don't have to feel that way because maybe that's all I can do. But it's probably better that I do it than not do it. If I don't do this, then what am I doing? And if I'm not doing anything, then why shouldn't I feel listless and bored and like a waste of my 37 years? There's a trivia question at the end of the episode. How old is Howard? Hint, it's not 37. I'm the clerk's age, another thing. Who would have believed that endured? And who would have believed that Kevin Smith would have had the career that he did after that movie? It is so interesting. The point is Joan Didion, Book of Common Prayer. It's a tremendous book, and that gets us back to the very beginning. Having laid all of that out, I think I'm going to skip our closing prayer by paying tribute to a Book of Common Prayer and telling you the joke that I was going to open the episode with. In the meantime, you can get in touch with me on Twitter at Vander_IM or by email, imhowardvander@gmail.com, looking to interview people. So get in touch if you want to be on Vanderjam Gaiden. Take care of yourselves in the meantime. Buy some merch. Send me some bucks and give me a reason to keep going, man. I'm a renegade, rule breaker, a real Joan Didion. Diddy runs the Didion. Yeah, I got nothing. This is as good a point as any to end the episode. So, all that to say, until next time, take care of yourselves and enjoy the joke that was supposed to open the episode. Joan Didion wanted to meditate on her own privilege and class standing, and she wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages of beautiful prose about it. Mayor Howard Vander wanted to interrogate his own privilege and class standing, so he pressed record. Good morning! It's the Vander Jam! And that's, you can fill in